Welcome to episode 4 of our Gurmit Focus, and I'm Satish Rai. In today's segment, we are going to talk about from which regions the Fiji's Gurmitias were recruited. And this particular episode is motivated by a recent conversation I had with somebody about something else. And in this conversation, a sentence was uttered which I have heard repeated here in Australia and in Fiji and other parts of the diaspora many times. And here, when South Indian descendant of Gurmitias refer to the North Indians as Hindustanis and themselves as Madrasis. I think this is misconception based on misinformation which has been historically passed down over 134 years to the descendants of Gurmitias. What is Madrasis, or who are Madrasis, and who are Hindustanis? By the end of this segment, we'll have a better understanding of who the Gurmitias were. To say in the beginning that all the Gurmitias were Hindustanis because they lived in Hindustan, India, Bharat, and they were the North Indians. Were not just Hindustanis, they are North Indians from different provinces, which I'm going to discuss. And Madrasis are people who live in Madras, now Chennai. And so the Madrasis in Fiji, the people who are referred to as Madrasis, come of a vast area of South India, and we're going to talk about that a bit later. So who are these North Indians? First of all, the Hindustanis, as it were, are also referred to as Calcuttians by the South Indians, and Calcuttians comes from the word Calcutta. And even today, people, when they talk with me, they say their ancestors came from Calcutta, and that is a huge misinformation, because hardly anybody to Fiji were recruited from Calcutta hesitated there when they mentioned come from. Yes, of course, they were put on the ship and shipped off to Fiji and other parts of diaspora, Gurmit diaspora from Calcutta. But from the very beginning, the first lot of Gurmitias were recruited. Not many from Calcutta itself were recruited. Yes, nearby from Nagaland, which is northern part of Bengal. Initially, they were transported to Mauritius, but that soon stopped. And then the search and the recruitment, basically to a large extent, was confined to Bihar. And it's from Bihar itself, the initial about 5,000 Fiji Gurmitias were recruited. And the distance between Calcutta and Bihar is vast. I have traveled from Calcutta to Bihar, and it's a long, long distance. And so they were put on trains, or somehow they were transported to Calcutta, and then they were put up in Garden Ridge area until sufficient numbers were accumulated, and they were put on the ship and transported. I'll talk about more about transportation a bit later. Okay, so first 5,000 were recruited from Bihar. And here I'd like to say there's Professor Brijlal in his doctoral thesis has analyzed all the Gurmit passes, and in his book, I think, Chalo Jahaji, he has got lots and lots of information about the Gurmitias who were transported to Fiji, which areas, particular areas from Bihar, which jillas, which districts from UP and from all other parts. He's categorized them, which caste, the age, everything is in there. So people who wish to know more about these things, they can look up Professor Brijlal's book. But now, after 5,000 were recruited from Bihar for some reason, which I will not discuss now, the recruitment, the search went up further into UP, which is known as Uttar Pradesh, and Biharis were basically, as far as I know, were the Bhojpuri speakers, and UPites are by and large, because they're so close to Awadh, were Awadhi speakers, and majority of Fiji Gurmitias were recruited from Uttar Pradesh. In my estimation, about 35,000 people from UP, Uttar Pradesh, were transported to Fiji. And there were other areas from Uttar Pradesh from where smaller numbers, much smaller numbers were taken. They were from Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, the United Punjab, which is now divided into Punjab and Haryana. There were small numbers taken from there as well, and as far as Afghanistan. So to lump them together as Hindustanis is not the right thing, and saying that they were from Calcutta is also not true, because they were not. And in fact, what is true about Calcutta is that they were put on ship and transported from Calcutta, and that's the only relevance of Calcutta. So even calling them Calcuttans is not the right terminology. Now, going down to south, there was a period in 1903 when the British decided that they are going to extend their search and recruitment to South India. They have been doing that for many centuries, not even years, because all in all, some 3 million South Indians were transported by the British and other European colonies to countries, rather, to other colonies, and mainly to Sri Lanka and Malaysia. And so when I went down to South India and to film and research, nobody talked about Fiji. They didn't even know about Fiji. They only remembered their ancestors being taken to Sri Lanka, and some remembered that they were taken to Malaysia. And once again, the term Madrasi is not right when you're talking about South Indians, because they were recruited from over vast areas rather, and 3 or 4 different states. From the west, the Nayars mainly were recruited from Kerala, in particular area called Palakkad, and there were some people from the Kannada speaking, from Karnataka, also were recruited. The areas, the middle area of Coimbatore And then coming east, quite a few were recruited from Tamil Nadu, and not many were in fact recruited from Madras itself, but areas around Madras, in fact, the majority were recruited from a place called Tanjore or Tanjavur, which is quite a distance south of Madras and nearer, about 50-60 kilometers from Madras is Chengalpat, which is south of Madras, or today's Chennai, and west of Chennai is a place called North Arcot, which is about once again 70-80 kilometers from Madras itself. So hardly anybody were recruited from Madras. And when we talk about Andhra Pradesh, I also like to travel from Palakkad to Chennai by road, and then I travel from Chennai to Andhra Pradesh, the area from where majority of the Telugu speaking people were recruited, which is 300-400 kilometers away from Madras, which is a place called Vijayawada, a beautiful city. And in quite really it is Vijayawada and Andhra Pradesh, that part, northern part of Andhra Pradesh, is much nearer physically to the northern Indians, the so-called Hindustanis. Then it is miles and miles away from the Nairs, from Kerala, and similar distance away from Tamilians who were recruited from Tanjavur. Yeah, and once again, somehow all these people with different culture, tradition, languages were lumped together in Fiji as Madrasis. And I wonder if the same thing has happened in other colonies, in Mauritius, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Ghana, in Suriname, in Jamaica, in French Reunion. It would be great to see if this misinformation and misconception also exists there. But certainly in Fiji's case, being labeled as Madrasis or Hindustanis is not right, because, as I said, all the Girmitias were Hindustanis, and as I go along in the next episode, I will try to dispel some other misconceptions about the Girmitias, where exactly they were recruited from, whether they were recruited from home or away from home, about the composition, the caste composition. There's a lot of misinformation about that, and there's a lot of information about women being from the slums of Calcutta. All those derogatory things which the colonialists wanted the Girmitas themselves to believe, and also the rest of the world to believe, in order to justify the exploitation of human beings. So in the next episode, I'll try to talk about that. Until then, thanks for watching, and it's goodbye from me.